You're going out of town again? Liam's voice was calm, though it masked the turmoil churning inside him. He leaned against the doorframe of the bedroom, watching as his wife, Camila, packed her suitcase. The scene was all too familiar. This was the fourth time in 2 months. Business trips, late nights at the office, last-minute meetings. It was starting to feel like she had another life, one he wasn't part of anymore. Camila didn't look up. She was tossing clothes into her suitcase with the kind of carelessness that came from routine. Liam noticed how effortlessly her hands folded the delicate lingerie, items that hadn't been touched in their marriage for months. He clenched his jaw, trying to suppress the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. "Yeah, another business trip," she replied, her voice distant, her eyes focused on the pile of clothes. Her tone was casual, but Liam heard something different, disinterest, maybe even indifference. His eyes fell on a specific item as she placed it in the suitcase, a maid's outfit, black lace and silk. Liam's heart skipped a beat. He had never seen her wear it for him. Hell, he hadn't seen her wear anything like that in a long time. Why is she packing that? He wondered. He cleared his throat, trying to sound normal. That outfit. His words were laced with suspicion, though he tried to keep his tone neutral. Camila's eyes flicked toward the outfit for only a second before she gave a nonchalant shrug. "Oh, that? Just something silly for a girl's night. You know how we get when we're out of town," she said, brushing it off with a forced chuckle. Liam didn't believe her. He hadn't believed her for a while now. It wasn't just the outfit. It was the way she had started pulling away from him. The way her phone was always face down on the table when they ate dinner. The way she would giggle at messages late into the night, but never share what was so funny. All the little things were adding up to one big, ugly truth. Camila was hiding something. His mind flashed back to the last time they had a real conversation, months ago, when things were still good between them. Or at least, he thought they were. Now it felt like he was living with a stranger. Liam sat in the dimly lit kitchen, his eyes fixed on the small box of condoms he had pulled from Camila's suitcase. His fingers gripped the sewing needle, steady and deliberate. The silence around him was thick, the only sound coming from the faint scraping of the needle as it punctured the plastic, creating invisible holes in each condom. One by one, he worked, each tiny puncture feeling like a release of the anger building up inside him. "You want to play this game?" he muttered, his voice low and filled with venom. "Let's see how far you'll go." He set the needle down, his hand trembling slightly, but not from fear or regret. It was the adrenaline of knowing he had taken the first step in his plan. There was no turning back now. After a few minutes, Liam returned the box to her suitcase, carefully placing it where she had hidden it. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The hardest part was done. Now it was just a matter of waiting. "How long will you be gone this time?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he walked closer to her. His eyes swept over the contents of her suitcase again, and that's when he saw it, a small box of condoms tucked neatly underneath her clothes. His heart stopped for a moment. She hadn't noticed his eyes lingering on it. Instead, she zipped the suitcase halfway and finally turned to face him. "Just a couple of days," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'll be back before you know it." "Right?" Liam muttered, the knot in his stomach tightening. "Before I know it." The room fell into a thick silence. Liam could feel the weight of the lies between them, but he wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation would lead to an argument, an explosion of emotions, and he wasn't ready to show his hand. He needed more proof, and he needed time to think. "I'll see you when I get back," Camila said, leaning in to give him a quick peck on the cheek, a hollow gesture that made him feel even worse. Her lips barely brushed his skin before she turned away, grabbing her suitcase and heading for the door. She paused, her back to him for a moment. Liam thought for just a second that she might turn around, that maybe she would say something, anything that would make this all go away. But she didn't. The door clicked shut behind her. Liam stood frozen in place, staring at the door. His heart was pounding in his chest, his thoughts racing. He walked over to the bed and sat down, staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been just moments ago. The box of condoms flashed in his mind, and the cold realization set in. She was planning to betray him. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling up inside him. He had tried to ignore the signs for so long. He had tried to convince himself that he was just being paranoid, that she was really working late, that the business trips were legitimate. But now there was no denying it. The evidence was there, staring him right in the face. Liam's mind whirred with possibilities. Who was it? Was it someone from work? Her boss, Thomas, maybe? He had always gotten a bad feeling about that guy. Too slick, too arrogant, the type of man who would think nothing of stealing another man's wife. And Camila had been spending a lot of time with him lately. Too much time. His hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to lose his temper. Exploding in anger wouldn't solve anything. He needed to be smart about this. If she was cheating on him, he needed to make sure he had all the facts before he confronted her. He stood up and walked over to the dresser, pulling open the drawer where Camila kept her things. His fingers brushed over her neatly folded clothes, his heart heavy. He rifled through the drawer until he found what he was looking for, her phone charger. If she had left for a business trip without it, that meant one thing. She was planning on staying with someone who already had a charger. Liam knew he was right. His mind was already racing with a plan. He wouldn't confront her, not yet. He would wait. He needed to catch her in the act, to see it with his own eyes. He knew he could track her. Her phone had a GPS feature that she didn't know he was aware of. All he had to do was wait for her to slip up. And when she did, he would be ready. As Liam stood there, looking around the empty room, his chest tightened. Part of him wanted to believe that there was still some other explanation, that maybe he was wrong, that maybe there was a reasonable excuse for all of this. But deep down, he knew the truth. He could feel it in his gut. She had betrayed him. He walked to the window and looked out at the street below, watching as Camila's car disappeared around the corner. His mind was swirling with thoughts of what she might be doing, who she might be with. But he forced himself to stay calm. He wasn't the kind of man to fly into a rage or lose control. He would handle this the way he handled everything else in life, with precision, with control, and with an iron will. As he stood there, staring into the distance, a new feeling settled over him. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger, though that was there, simmering beneath the surface. No, what he felt now was something colder. It was determination. If she was going to betray him, she would pay for it. You want to play games, Camila? Liam whispered to himself, his jaw tightening. Fine, let's play. Liam stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the street, his mind already racing through his next steps. The GPS tracker he had installed on her phone months ago would give him the information he needed. All he had to do was wait for the signal. Sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in hand, Liam opened the tracking app. A small red that appeared on the map, slowly moving toward the edge of town. She was heading west, just like she had said, but instead of the business district, that it veered off into the suburbs. You're not going to the office, he murmured, narrowing his eyes at the screen. The confirmation hit him like a punch, but there was no surprise. This was the proof he had been waiting for. Liam grabbed his keys and headed out the door. He wasn't going to follow her, not yet. His goal wasn't to catch her in the act today. He needed to think bigger. He needed to gather everything. Only then would he make his move. He turned away from the window and headed for his office. There was work to be done. Later that afternoon, Liam sat in front of his computer, piecing together the puzzle. The GPS had led him straight to a hotel. It confirmed his suspicions. Camila wasn't just cheating with anyone. She was with her boss, the same man who had dominated her time for months. Liam had always found Thomas to be smug, a man who enjoyed the power and attention that came with his position. He had seen the way Thomas looked at Camila, too, like she was some prize he could win. Liam's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he considered his next move. He wanted to hurt them both, and not just in the moment. He wanted the pain to linger, to ruin their lives the way they were trying to ruin his. But it had to be precise. He made a few calls. One was to a private investigator he had used before, a man who specialized in cases like this. The second was to a lawyer, the same one who had handled his friend's divorce last year. Liam wasn't going to go into this blind. He was going to hit them both where it hurt, personally and professionally. The following day, Liam received an email from the investigator. Attached were photos, videos of Camila and Thomas together, not just meeting for business, but embracing, kissing, and slipping into a hotel room that was far from their work environment. Liam stared at the images, his stomach churning. but he forced himself to stay calm. There was no room for emotion now, only action. The whiskey burned as it slid down Liam's throat, but the sting felt good, grounding him in the moment. He sat alone at the dining table, staring at the screen of his phone. Thomas's contact information glared back at him. The culmination of days spent planning, waiting, and stewing in the cold rage that had settled inside him. Tonight it was time to unleash it. With a steady hand, Liam pressed the call button. He didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess himself. The phone rang twice before a voice, smug and unsuspecting, answered on the other end. "Hello." Liam leaned back in his chair, letting the silence linger for a moment before speaking, his voice calm but seething with venom. "Hey man," he began, knowing that this conversation would forever change the trajectory of two lives, Thomas's and Camila's. "Congrats, you're going to be a daddy." There was a pause on the line. The shift in Thomas's tone was instant. "What? Who is this?" The panic crept into his voice, shattering the easy confidence Liam knew he carried around like a shield. "It's Liam, Camila's husband," Liam replied, savoring the discomfort. "You know, the woman you've been screwing behind my back." The words came out casually, as if discussing a weather report, but the weight they carried was unmistakable. Another beat of silence. Then, Thomas stammered, Look, man, I don't know what you think." "No need to explain." Liam cut him off, his voice as smooth as the whiskey. "I've seen everything I need to see. But here's the thing. You're about to inherit all my headaches." He let the sentence hang for a second, knowing full well what it would do to Thomas. "Oh, and tell my wife she's homeless now. Divorce papers are on the way." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the sound of Thomas trying to process the situation. For a brief moment, Liam imagined the scene unfolding on the other end, Thomas probably pacing around his sterile office or his suburban home, frantically running through excuses, trying to figure out how everything had unraveled so fast. But Liam wasn't finished. He still had one more twist to deliver. "And by the way," he added, his voice dropping a notch, almost conspiratorial, "you might want to get yourself checked out. I hear condoms aren't as reliable as they seem." The line went dead. Liam stared at the phone for a second before setting it down on the table. The room was quiet again, the air heavy with finality. He imagined Thomas now, probably throwing his phone across the room in a panic, trying to figure out what had just happened. Camila was likely sitting with him, oblivious to the chaos about to come crashing down around them. But for Liam, this wasn't the end. There was still one more stop he needed to make. Liam took another step. He packed Camila's belongings into boxes. Every piece of clothing, every pair of shoes, everything she had ever brought into their home. The next morning, the sun barely broke through the overcast sky as Liam loaded the last of Camila's belongings into his truck. Each box he carried out of the house felt like shedding a weight he had been burdened with for months. Clothes, shoes, perfume she used to wear for him, but now wore for someone else. He slammed the tailgate shut with finality, then stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air. This was the day. It wasn't just about dumping her things. It was about wiping the slate clean. Liam climbed into the driver's seat, the engine of his truck growling to life. As he drove through the quiet streets, his mind raced. He didn't feel victorious, just tired. Tired of the lies, the deception, the emptiness that had gnawed at him for too long. He had planned this moment carefully, but no amount of planning could prepare him for what he was about to do. 20 minutes later, Liam pulled up outside Thomas's house. It was one of those suburban homes with a perfectly trimmed lawn and a gleaming front door, the kind of place that screamed domestic bliss. But Liam knew better. He knew what went on behind those closed doors. He stepped out of the truck and began unloading the boxes, setting them on the driveway with deliberate care. Each box stacked neatly, as if he were helping someone move in rather than out. When he finished, he walked up to the door and rang the bell. The door opened a few seconds later, and there she was, Nova, Thomas's wife. She looked nothing like Liam had expected. Her features were soft, but her eyes carried a sharpness, a depth that suggested she wasn't someone easily broken. She wore an elegant sweater and jeans, her hair tied back loosely. For a moment, Liam hesitated. "Can I help you?" Nova asked, her voice polite but wary, her eyes flicking to the boxes on the driveway. Liam cleared his throat, steadying himself. Yes, actually, he said. I'm Daniel, he said simply, offering no further explanation yet. Her brows furrowed slightly, and she glanced at the truck behind him, the boxes in the back. Olivia's husband? She asked, the realization dawning slowly, as if she already knew but hadn't wanted to believe it. Daniel nodded, then reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. I think you should see this, he said, his voice firm. Without a word, he handed her the phone. Nova glanced down at the screen, her face unreadable. The video played, grainy footage of Thomas and Camila laughing, kissing, their hands all over each other in a hotel lobby. Liam watched her closely, expecting anger, perhaps tears. But as the video ended, her face remained calm, only her hand trembling slightly as she handed the phone back. I'm sorry, Liam said softly, unsure of what else to say. I thought you deserved to know. Nova stood there for a long moment, staring at the boxes again. Then, with a deep sigh, she looked back at Liam. You're not the first one, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Thomas has been cheating on me for years, with multiple women. Liam blinked, stunned. Of all the responses he had anticipated, this was not one of them. What? He asked, his shock palpable. Nova nodded slowly, as if the admission cost her something each time she said it. It's been going on for years, she continued, her tone detached, almost as if she were describing someone else's life. I found out about the first one 5 years ago. He promised it was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again. But she trailed off, a bitter smile crossing her lips. I guess some people never change. Liam was at a loss for words. He had expected outrage, maybe even tears, but not this. Not a woman so numb to betrayal that she could hardly react anymore. Why did you stay? He asked after a moment, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. Nova's eyes flickered, as if the question had hit a nerve. She crossed her arms and shrugged. I don't know, she admitted, her voice soft. Maybe I thought he would change. Maybe I thought it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to face the truth. She looked away, her gaze distant. But after a while, you just get used to it. You get used to the lies, the betrayal. It becomes normal. Liam shook his head. That's no way to live, he said quietly, feeling a strange mix of pity and anger, not for Thomas, but for the way his selfishness had dragged so many people down with him. Nova looked back at him, her eyes hardening slightly. No, it's not, she agreed, her voice firmer now. But I'm done. I should have been done years ago, but I'm done now. There was a long silence between them, the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air. Finally, Liam glanced at the boxes. What are you going to do? He asked, genuinely curious. Nova followed his gaze, her lips pressing into a thin line. I'm going to make sure he knows exactly what he's lost, she said, her voice cold. And then I'm going to leave him with nothing. Liam nodded, understanding all too well the desire for revenge. I've already started that process, he said, gesturing toward the boxes. Camila's not coming home. She made her choice. Now she can live with it. Nova's expression softened slightly. It's strange, isn't it? She said almost to herself. How people can be so selfish, so destructive, and not care about the damage they leave behind. Liam nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. They stood there in silence for a moment, two strangers bound together by the same betrayal, both trying to make sense of the wreckage left in its wake. Finally, Nova took a deep breath and glanced back at the house. I should go, she said, her voice steady again. I have some things to take care of. Liam nodded. Good luck, he said sincerely. Nova gave him a small, sad smile. You too, she said before turning and walking back inside, the door closing softly behind her. Liam stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. He had come here expecting confrontation, maybe even a fight, but instead, he had found something much more sobering. The quiet devastation of a woman who had been betrayed so many times she had lost the will to fight back. As he got back into his truck and drove away, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that in some ways, Nova's situation was worse than his own. He had the anger, the fire to fight back, to take control of his life again. But Nova? She had been so worn down by years of betrayal that she didn't even seem angry anymore. Just tired. The thought stayed with him as he drove back home. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel like he had won anything. All he felt was the weight of everything that had been lost: trust, love, faith. And now, all that was left was the ruins. But at least, Liam thought, as he pulled into his driveway, he had the chance to rebuild. Camila and Thomas, on the other hand, would soon discover the cost of their selfishness. They would live with the consequences of their choices, just as Nova and Liam had. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Camila's return that evening was quiet, almost too quiet. She unlocked the front door, humming lightly to herself as she stepped into the house. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she walked through the entryway, expecting the familiar warmth of home. But something was wrong, very wrong. The house felt colder, emptier. It didn't take long for her to notice the absence. Her suitcase, the bag she usually left by the door, were gone. Camila frowned, her breath catching in her throat. She hurried through the house, searching frantically, but every room she entered was the same, empty of her presence. The closet, her vanity, even the bathroom, all her things had vanished. Panic surged through her, heart hammering in her chest. She ran to the living room, calling out, "Liam? Liam, where are you?" Her voice echoed back to her, unanswered. Camila froze for a second, trying to gather her thoughts. This couldn't be happening. He couldn't have found out, not like this. Her mind raced as she thought about her next move. But before she could act, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, and there he was, Liam, standing in the doorway, his face a mask of calm fury. "Looking for something?" he asked, his voice so cold it sent a chill down Camila's spine. "Liam, she began, but her words caught in her throat. The look in his eyes told her everything. He knew. He had figured it all out. She gasped, rushing toward him, her eyes wide with fear. "Liam, please, I can explain. This is not what you think." Her voice trembled as she tried to reach for his hand, but he stepped back, his expression unmoved. "Explain?" Liam's voice was cold, devoid of any warmth. "What exactly are you going to explain, Camila? How you've been sleeping with your boss behind my back for months? Or maybe you'll explain why all your things are packed in the truck outside?" Camila fell to her knees, grabbing his pant leg desperately. "It was a mistake. A stupid mistake," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "Please, just listen to me. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just did. I was weak. But I love you, Liam. I don't want to lose you." Her voice broke, the sobs racking her body. She clung to him as if her life depended on it, shaking with fear and guilt. But Liam just stood there, looking down at her with the same cold detachment. He had waited for this moment. He had thought about what it would feel like, watching her beg. But now that it was happening, he felt nothing. "I gave you everything," Liam said, his voice low but steady. "I trusted you. I built a life with you, and you threw it all away." "For what? For him?" Camila shook her head frantically. "No, it wasn't like that. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just, I don't know. I was stupid. It didn't mean anything." Liam scoffed, stepping away from her grasp. "It didn't mean anything?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Then why did you keep going back to him? Why did you lie to my face every single time you left for those business trips? You think I'm a fool, Camila? You think I wouldn't find out?" Camila sobbed harder, crawling after him as he stepped farther away. "Please, Liam. I'll do anything. I'll fix this. We can fix this. I don't want to lose you." Her words tumbled out in a desperate plea, but Liam remained unmoved. "You already lost me," Liam said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The moment you chose him over me, you lost everything." He turned away from her, walking toward the window and staring out at the street. Camila stood shakily, wiping her face, trying to find the words that would undo the damage she had caused. "We can work through this. People make mistakes, Liam. I made a mistake, but I love you. I love us." Liam turned back to her, his face set in stone. "Love?" He spat the word out like it was poison. "You don't know what love is, Camila. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied, betrayed, and humiliated me." He shook his head, disgusted. You don't love anyone but yourself. Camila's breath caught. She was running out of time, and she knew it. She could see it in his eyes, the finality of his decision. Please, she begged, her voice barely a whisper. Please don't leave me. I can't do this without you. Liam's gaze softened for a moment, but it wasn't sympathy. It was pity. You did this to yourself, Camila, he said, his tone quiet but firm. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Her face crumpled as she realized the weight of his words. Where will I go? She whispered, her voice small. I have nothing without you. Her desperation was palpable, her hands trembling as she reached out to him one last time. Liam watched her for a long moment, then sighed. You'll figure it out, he said, his voice cold once again. But you're not my problem anymore. He stepped past her, walking toward the front door. Camila's heart sank as she watched him go. Liam, wait, she screamed, running after him. Please don't do this. Don't leave me like this. But Liam didn't stop. He opened the door and stepped outside, leaving Camila standing in the middle of the empty house, her tears falling silently to the floor. The slam of the door echoed through the room, final and unforgiving. For a moment, Camila just stood there, frozen in place. She had begged, pleaded, humiliated herself in the hopes that Liam would change his mind, that he would show her the same mercy he had once given so freely. But now, she realized, mercy was the one thing he had run out of. She fell to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her hands clawing at the empty space where her life had once been. Everything she had, her home, her marriage, her security, was gone, and it was her fault. She had made the choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. As she sat there, broken and alone, the reality of what she had done sank in. She had destroyed everything she had ever loved, and there was no going back. The cold truth of Liam's words echoed in her mind. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. And for the first time, Camila understood the weight of those words. There was no forgiveness waiting for her. No second chances. Only the ruin she had brought upon herself. She had thought she could have it all. Liam's love and Thomas's attention. But now, standing in the wreckage of her life, Camila realized she had nothing. And that was the cruelest punishment of all. Camila had barely managed to pack a small bag when she arrived at Thomas's doorstep, her eyes swollen from hours of crying. The walk from Liam's house to her car felt like a nightmare, each step heavier than the last, weighed down by the shame and despair of what she had lost. As she rang the bell, waiting for Thomas to answer, she fought back the tears, trying to collect herself. When the door finally opened, Thomas stood there with a look of concern, but there was a hesitance behind his eyes. You're here, he said, stepping aside to let her in. I didn't have anywhere else to go, Camila replied, her voice small and defeated. Thomas sighed, closing the door behind her. I know. There was an uncomfortable silence as she put down her bag and glanced around the apartment. It was stark, minimalist, and cold, nothing like the home she had shared with Liam. We'll figure this out, Thomas said, trying to sound reassuring, but even he seemed unsure. Camila could sense the tension between them already, and as much as she wanted to believe in his words, she knew things had changed. The affair had once been an escape, an illusion of excitement, but now, standing in the middle of Thomas's apartment, it felt like a prison. The news of their affair spread like wildfire, faster than either Camila or Thomas had anticipated. Within days, it seemed like everyone knew. Whispers followed her at work, colleagues avoided eye contact, and the invitations to lunches or happy hours disappeared. Camila had never felt so isolated. One morning, as she walked into the office, heads turned and conversations stopped mid-sentence. The weight of judgment was suffocating. She tried to keep her head high, but the shame gnawed at her insides. Even Thomas, once so confident and composed, was now showing signs of the strain. His position at the company was no longer secure. Clients had started to question his integrity, and his relationship with upper management grew tense. This is getting out of hand, Thomas muttered one evening after yet another tense day at the office. What do you mean? Camila asked, though she already knew the answer. I might lose my job, he said bluntly. They've been hinting at it for weeks now. If one more client pulls out, he trailed off, rubbing his temples in frustration. Camila felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't expected this. When the affair had started, she thought she could balance everything: her marriage, her career, her life with Thomas. But now, it was all crumbling around her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, unsure of what else to say. Thomas looked at her, his face hardening. "Yeah, well, sorry doesn't fix anything, does it?" The bitterness in his tone stung. Camila had thought, at the very least, they'd have each other. But the cracks in their relationship were already showing. She hadn't moved in with Thomas out of love, it was out of necessity. And now, in the face of real consequences, their affair seemed more fragile than ever. Meanwhile, Liam's life took a very different turn. Free from the weight of betrayal, he embraced the solitude at first, relishing the quiet moments he hadn't had in years. He took up jogging again, something he'd given up after marriage, and spent more time reconnecting with old friends. It felt good to be in control of his own life again, to make decisions without constantly second-guessing whether he was being lied to. One evening, after a long day at work, Liam found himself at a bar with a few friends. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and banter. He hadn't felt this light in years. Then, one of his friends nudged him. "Look who's checking you out," his friend said with a grin, nodding toward the other end of the bar. Liam turned, and sure enough, there was a woman sitting with her friends, giving him a curious glance. She smiled when their eyes met, a soft, genuine smile that caught him off guard. Liam smiled back, unsure of how to react. It had been so long since he'd even thought about dating again. "Go talk to her," his friend urged. At first, Liam hesitated. He wasn't ready for anything serious, and the scars of his marriage still felt fresh. But something about this woman, the way she carried herself with confidence yet kindness, intrigued him. Eventually, after a few minutes of contemplation, he walked over. "Hi," Liam said, his voice steady but slightly nervous. "I'm Liam." The woman smiled warmly. "Willow," she replied, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you, Liam." Back in Thomas's apartment, things were far from hopeful. The tension between Camila and Thomas had grown unbearable. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was usually about the fallout of their affair. Thomas had been demoted at work, his career on the brink of collapse. The affair that had once been thrilling now felt like a burden, and both of them knew it. "Maybe we should take a break," Thomas suggested one evening, his voice tired. Camila looked at him, startled. "A break?" "Yeah," he said, avoiding her gaze. "This isn't working. We're both miserable, and it's not getting any better." Camila felt the sting of his words. She had given up everything for this relationship, and now it was slipping away too. "So what? You're just going to walk away?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "I don't know, Camila," Thomas replied, exasperated. "What do you want me to do? My life is falling apart because of this." "Your life? What about mine?" Camila shot back. "I have nothing left because of you." They stood in silence, the weight of their decisions crashing down on them. The affair had destroyed not just their marriages, but their careers, their reputations, and now, even their relationship with each other. As the weeks passed, Camila found herself more and more isolated. She lost her job, and her so-called friends had distanced themselves. Every day felt like a struggle to hold on to whatever semblance of a life she had left. Meanwhile, Liam was thriving. He wasn't rushing into anything serious with Willow, but they continued to see each other, slowly building something new. He didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was in control of his own happiness. Camila, on the other hand, was left with nothing but regret. The fallout of her choices had been swift and brutal, and there was no one left to blame but herself. She had gambled everything on an affair, thinking she could have it all. Now, as she sat alone in the empty apartment, she realized how wrong she had been. Liam had moved on, rebuilding his life brick by brick. But Camila? She was left standing in the ruins, with no one to help her pick up the pieces. Months after the chaos, Liam found himself sitting in a quaint cafe, the morning light spilling through the windows, casting a warm glow over everything. The comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and the hum of casual conversations provided a soothing backdrop. Across the table sat Nova, Thomas's estranged wife, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength. They had been meeting here regularly for a while now. What had started as mutual consolation had slowly blossomed into something deeper, more intimate. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to relax like this again," Nova said, her smile genuine yet tinged with the residue of all they had been through. Liam stirred his coffee thoughtfully, glancing up at her. "Me neither," he replied, his voice calm but sincere. "I guess we've both come a long way." There was a pause, not awkward but comfortable, as they both reflected on how drastically their lives had changed. Months earlier, they had been two people caught in the wreckage of betrayal. Now, they sat together, survivors of the same storm, leaning on each other in ways neither of them had anticipated. "So, what's next for us?" Nova asked, her tone light, but with a hint of curiosity that suggested she had been pondering this question for a while. She looked at Liam with eyes that sought clarity. Liam put his cup down and leaned back slightly, meeting her gaze. He felt a warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm looking forward to finding out." His smile was soft but sincere, a far cry from the hardened expressions he had worn in the aftermath of Camila's betrayal. Nova laughed lightly, a sound that seemed to brighten the room. "I guess that's fair." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "It's strange, isn't it? How everything fell apart. But we found each other through it all." Liam nodded. "Yeah, it is. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here with you, I wouldn't have believed it." They both fell silent for a moment, each lost in thought. The weight of their shared experiences hung in the air, but it wasn't oppressive. It was simply there, a part of them now, shaping who they had become. Liam thought back to the first time they had met, not in this cafe, but at Thomas's doorstep, when he had delivered Camila's things. That day had been a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, shock, but it had also been the beginning of something unexpected. Their conversations had started cautiously at first, both of them needing to vent about their ex-spouses without really knowing what to say to each other. But as time went on, they found comfort in their shared understanding. There was no need to explain the deep hurt. They both knew it all too well. The more they talked, the more they realized how much they had in common beyond the betrayal that had brought them together. "I don't miss him, you know," Nova said one evening over dinner, about a month after the affair had gone public. "Not the way I thought I would. I missed the idea of what I thought we had. But him? No. He was never really there." Liam had nodded, feeling a similar emptiness when thinking about Camila. He had spent months wondering how he could have missed the signs, why he hadn't seen the cracks in their relationship sooner. But the truth was, Camila had become a stranger to him long before her affair with Thomas. Their marriage had been eroding quietly, slowly, until it collapsed entirely. "It's like you keep holding on, hoping things will go back to how they were," Liam had said, his voice quiet but steady. "But they never do. And you realize it's not just them that changed, it's you too." Now, as Liam and Nova sat together in the cafe, those conversations seemed like distant memories, remnants of lives they no longer belonged to. They had both let go of their pasts, bit by bit, and in doing so, they had found space to rebuild. "I think I was more scared of being alone than of losing him," Nova said, pulling Liam back to the present. "But now I'm not afraid anymore." She reached across the table, gently placing her hand on his. "And that's partly because of you." Liam looked at her hand, then up at her face, feeling a rush of gratitude. He hadn't expected to meet someone like Nova, not after everything. But here she was, strong, resilient, and standing by his side. "You've helped me too," he admitted, his thumb lightly brushing against her hand. "More than you know." Nova smiled, her eyes softening. "Well, we're in this together now, right?" "Yeah," Liam said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "We are." As they finished their coffee, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, plans for the weekend, a new restaurant that had just opened, maybe a trip out of town. It wasn't anything monumental, but that was the beauty of it. Their lives had been defined by drama and betrayal for so long that these small, Everyday moments felt like a gift. Do you think we'll ever stop talking about them? Nova asked suddenly, a small grin playing on her lips. I mean, our exes. Will we ever run out of things to say about them? Liam chuckled. I hope so. I like to think we'll reach a point where they're just part of the background, not the main event. Nova raised her cup in a mock toast. To the background, then. They clinked their cups together, laughing. Meanwhile, Camila and Thomas were far from laughing. Their lives had taken a sharp downward turn. Thomas's career had been irreparably damaged, and Camila was still struggling to find her footing. Their affair, once a secret thrill, had become the source of their greatest misery. They were stuck with each other, but the spark was gone, replaced by bitterness and regret. Rumors about them still circulated in their professional and social circles, making it hard for either of them to move on. Camila had tried to reach out to Liam once or twice, but he had ignored her messages. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it, alone, despite being with Thomas. As Liam and Nova left the cafe, walking side by side down the sunlit street, Liam felt a sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking back. The future was unwritten, but it was full of possibilities, and he was ready to face it, no longer burdened by the past. Where to now? Nova asked, slipping her hand into his. Wherever we want, Liam replied, smiling at her. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Liam truly believed that.